Did you think ancient palaces were built by heroes and geniuses? Think again. Your hands will be worn to the bone, your mind will drown in bureaucratic madness, and your soul will dissolve into the endless monotony of constructing the most meaningless masterpiece of the Minoan civilization, the Palace of Knossos. Welcome to Crete, where grandeur and boredom merge into one, destroying your faith in the beauty of the past forever. But before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is right now. It's fascinating to see who's joined us today. Now, get comfortable. We're about to start. You have never truly understood the appeal of grandeur. Grand palaces, sprawling cities, or monuments designed to outlive their creators all seemed to you rather tedious, extravagant attempts to impress future generations who would inevitably care little about the details. Yet here you are, stepping unsteadily off the creaking wooden deck of the merchant ship onto the worn docks of Crete to participate in one of history's most ambitious and undoubtedly most unnecessary projects, the construction of the Palace of Knossos. The sky above Crete is precisely the type of oppressive blue you have always found exhausting. There is not a single cloud to break its monotony, only an endless expanse of heat pressing down, as if the gods themselves disapprove of the island's vain attempt to impress them. You squint, allowing your eyes to adjust, observing the port in detail, each brick in the quay's masonry identical, each stone worn into dreary uniformity by countless arrivals like yours. The journey itself was an ordeal designed, it seems, specifically to test your patience. Departing from the mainland, you had spent endless days aboard a cramped ship, which rocked back and forth with a predictably nauseating rhythm. The captain, a dour, humorless fellow from Mycenae, had insisted on recounting, repeatedly, the precise calculations required to avoid currents, storms, and shallow reefs. Each story exactly the same as the one before, down to the number of knots tied and stars observed. You listened, naturally, out of politeness or resignation, though it made no difference. Either way, the monotony dripped into your bones. But that ordeal is behind you. Now you face another, even greater in its dullness. Your task on this island is simple, so deceptively simple, indeed, that it promises mind numbing repetition for years to come. You are a craftsman, an artisan brought here to mold, shape, and place bricks and limestone blocks exactly as dictated by an army of architects who speak a language of pedantic precision. The foreman who greets you at the dock is one such creature, small, weathered, thin faced, with narrowed eyes that seem suspicious of creativity itself. You have arrived exactly at midday, he states flatly, as though this is not a coincidence but a carefully planned irritation designed specifically for him. Yes, you reply, already weary. I suppose I have. He studies a small clay tablet marked meticulously with strange linear symbols. You suspect it holds no actual meaning, but was invented solely to justify his severe demeanor. Finally, he looks up. You are assigned to the eastern wing, wall detail. You will receive instructions from Master Daedalus himself. He demands absolute exactitude. You have heard of Daedalus, of course. Who hasn't? The legendary architect whose designs fill more with dread than admiration. Known for constructing the labyrinth itself, the twisting maze beneath the palace, intended, so it is whispered, to trap the monstrous Minotaur. You sigh inwardly, imagining endless hallways stretching out before you, each identical to the next. Such is the fate that awaits your meticulous talents. The foreman leads you through winding streets, crowded with merchant carts piled high with pottery, figs, and baskets of olives. Each stall offers wares indistinguishable from the next, a dreary sameness that makes you question whether Crete values uniformity over variety by choice or mere lack of imagination. The sounds of merchants shouting prices mingle into a monotonous drone, indistinguishable syllables blending into one long, dull chant. On the edge of the city, beyond bustling markets and clusters of squat, whitewashed homes, the outline of the palace looms into view for the first time. It is enormous, sprawling without reason, walls upon walls rising from the earth, as if deliberately designed to impress or intimidate any who approach. For a moment, you cannot help but feel a grudging admiration for its absurd scale. Then the feeling passes, replaced by a heavy weariness. You find yourself wondering exactly how many bricks it must have taken, how many monotonous hours spent by craftsmen just like you to raise these walls toward the cloudless sky. The thought makes your head ache dully, as though a great stone had been placed upon it. Arriving at the eastern wing, you encounter the workers, laboring methodically under a ruthless sun. Rows upon rows of stone blocks wait patiently, their shapes precisely measured, each block virtually identical. Workers carry these blocks to carefully marked positions, sliding them into place under the stern, unsmiling eyes of overseers who periodically jot notes onto yet more clay tablets. There seems to be a clay tablet for every eventuality: tablets to record bricks, tablets for rations, tablets for punishments, and, surely, a tablet cataloging all other tablets. It is hard not to notice the oppressive silence that pervades the worksite. Men communicate in nods and gestures rather than words, having long ago abandoned unnecessary conversation. Perhaps, you muse darkly, they have simply run out of topics. After all, there is only so much one can say about bricks. Here is your position, the foreman announces abruptly, gesturing toward a half completed wall indistinguishable from any other. Thank you, you mutter, already feeling the monotony settling over you like a thick blanket. Your station is simple and repetitive, mixing mortar, applying it, setting stones, repeating. As your hands move automatically, your mind wanders to questions of supreme irrelevance, like how many stones are placed in a single day, or how many days it takes before a man forgets his own name, lost in the sea of identical bricks. The worker next to you, a tall, weather-beaten figure, speaks briefly. Been here 7 years, he grumbles, every day the same. His voice holds no complaint, only dull resignation. You wonder if, in 7 years, You too will speak like him, drained of feeling, of hope, of annoyance, even. Just simple, emotionless acceptance of endless sameness. By nightfall, you retreat to the cramped dormitory set aside for workers, collapsing onto straw filled mats that provide no comfort, merely an illusion of rest. Your muscles ache, your hands cracked from mortar. Other men around you immediately fall asleep, snoring rhythmically, as monotonous as the work itself. You stare upward, watching the faint flicker of torchlight dance across the ceiling, casting identical shadows on the walls. The first day is finished, and yet there is no triumph in survival, only the weary knowledge of countless, identical days ahead. Tomorrow will be the same, as will the day after, and the day after that. Already, you can feel the slow erosion of your enthusiasm, worn away brick by brick, and somewhere, deep beneath the foundations, you imagine a dark, twisting labyrinth waiting patiently, ready to consume not just monsters, but the dreams, hopes, and perhaps even the souls of men who dare to build palaces to vanity. Slowly, finally, you drift into uneasy sleep, haunted by the image of endless walls, infinite bricks, and monotonous paths spiraling inward, forever inescapable. Days become indistinguishable, melting seamlessly into weeks, and those weeks into long, wearisome months. Soon, you lose count, for counting itself seems pointless. You awake each dawn to the familiar call of overseers, whose voices have transformed into a dull, meaningless drone, a monotonous melody composed entirely of repetitive commands. Lift the block, place it here, apply mortar, and again. You find yourself an unwilling participant in a ceaselessly tedious orchestra conducted by an invisible maestro whose only pleasure seems to be exacting perfection from the utterly mundane. Every morning begins the same. You rise from your straw filled pallet, stiff and sore, and step into the chill of pre dawn air that never refreshes, merely seeps into your bones. Breakfast is bland barley porridge, tasteless and gray, accompanied by dry bread harder than yesterday's bricks. As you chew in resigned silence, your companions avoid eye contact, too exhausted to pretend there might be something novel about the meal. After breakfast, you shuffle to your station at the eastern wing, your position unchanged, the task eternally identical. Your fingers, now thick with calluses, automatically mix mortar with sand and lime, stirring methodically until your arms ache. You spread the mixture onto precisely measured stones, carefully placing each one upon the last. The overseers watch closely, eyes narrowed, as if hoping to catch an error, a deviation from the meticulous boredom. The foremen, stern, humorless individuals, take obsessive pride in their monotony. They measure each stone twice, sometimes 3 times, as if the stones themselves might spontaneously decide to alter their shape. You secretly wonder whether these men sleep at night or merely dream of measurements and endless clay tablets on which they record every insignificant detail. At first, you tried to find amusement or curiosity in small things. You studied each worker, observed their peculiar habits. how one man scratched his beard every 20 bricks exactly, or how another counted under his breath in a rhythm that never varied. But soon, even these details became part of the general numbness, indistinct and gray. Master Daedalus himself occasionally strides through the building site, surrounded by a cluster of nervous apprentices, all carrying clay tablets and styluses. You find Daedalus fascinating in an unsettling way. His presence brings a hush so intense you feel as if the stones themselves hold their breath. Daedalus does not smile, nor does he frown. His face is frozen into a permanent mask of professional dissatisfaction. He inspects your work briefly, nodding curtly, neither approving nor disapproving, merely accepting that your efforts exist. One afternoon, Daedalus summons all workers to listen to his instructions regarding a newly devised corridor. You gather reluctantly, sensing yet another lecture filled with precise, insufferable detail. This corridor, he announces solemnly, must be constructed exactly as I have drawn it, no deviations permitted. Each hallway must appear identical, every stone, every angle precise. You nearly laugh bitterly at his seriousness, realizing suddenly that the endless sameness is not accidental, it's deliberate. Daedalus, it seems, truly believes the repetition can protect against chaos, as if symmetry and uniformity are the only barriers standing between the palace and utter disaster. Your tasks grow ever more repetitive. Every corridor leads to another identical corridor. Each doorway opens to reveal yet another identical room. There are no windows in these inner passages, no relief from the suffocating sameness. Workers whisper grim rumors that the palace itself will soon resemble the labyrinth hidden below, vast, meaningless, and impossible to escape. You sometimes pause, leaning against half completed walls, and stare blankly at the endless rows of perfectly aligned stone. You try to calculate how many thousands of stones you have already laid and how many thousands remain. But numbers fail to comfort you, dissolving instead into abstraction, meaningless as dust. You understand suddenly why your fellow workers stopped counting years ago. Night comes, offering no relief, merely marking the boundary between identical days. You gather at a communal table where exhausted craftsmen eat tasteless stew without enthusiasm, their faces expressionless, empty. Someone murmurs about an accident. A wall collapsed in the western wing. No one reacts. Accidents are ordinary here, part of the routine monotony. Even tragedy feels predictable. Occasionally, new workers arrive, their faces filled with naive enthusiasm that quickly vanishes. Within days, their expressions turn hollow as they join the ranks of the endlessly tired. One young man from Athens asked you once, "Does the palace ever end?" You shrugged silently, knowing he would soon learn the truth himself. On rare days, a minor disruption breaks the monotony. A delivery of fresh stones, slightly irregular, requiring painstaking adjustments. Or perhaps a storm sweeps through, forcing temporary suspension of work. These interruptions only deepen your gloom, reminding you of the inevitable return to repetitive toil. Your health, too, becomes monotonous in its decline. Your back aches constantly, muscles tightened into permanent knots. Your knees groan in protest each time you lift another stone, though you scarcely notice anymore. Pain itself becomes repetitive, predictable, indistinguishable from boredom. One afternoon, while placing yet another block atop an identical wall, you suddenly sense something unsettling beneath your feet. A low, distant rumble, faint but distinct. You glance around, but your fellow workers continue their monotonous tasks without noticing. You wonder momentarily if this palace, built atop something darker, might someday collapse into itself, swallowed by the vast labyrinth beneath. Yet even this sinister thought cannot fully pierce your boredom. Soon you return to work, laying stones mechanically, the brief sensation already forgotten in the numbing routine. Each evening you attempt to scrub the mortar from your hands, but it clings stubbornly beneath your nails, turning them permanently gray. Your reflection in bowls of murky water grows unfamiliar, eyes sunken, expression dulled by the endless, meticulous labor. Days stretch into eternity. Your mind wanders, forming images of a distant life you barely remember. Green hillsides, olive groves, laughter echoing from streets not dominated by stone. But even your memories seem monotonous now, as if infected by your current reality. In rare, cynical moments, you wonder why anyone bothers building at all, knowing that someday these stones will crumble, turning your painstaking labor into meaningless dust. But you never voice these thoughts aloud, knowing the overseers would only instruct you again in the virtues of precise measurements and identical walls. Finally, as evening approaches, you carefully lay your last stone of the day, stepping back to inspect the wall stretching endlessly before you. The overseer checks his tablet, nodding mechanically. Acceptable, he murmurs. Until tomorrow, you reply softly, words empty of meaning, and you shuffle away, knowing tomorrow promises nothing but repetition, the inevitable monotony of building something vast, endless, and utterly meaningless. If your days of manual labor have dulled your senses, preparing you to accept the monotonous and repetitive tasks of palace construction, your evenings soon reveal an even deeper form of misery, bureaucracy. You never thought you'd long for something as basic as laying bricks. But when you are handed your first stock of clay tablets and a sharpened stylus, you immediately miss the simplicity of lifting heavy stones. The overseer who entrusts you with this dreadful responsibility does so without enthusiasm. He hands you the tablets solemnly, as though passing along the ashes of someone's deceased relative. These must be carefully inscribed, he instructs flatly. Mistakes are not tolerated. Of course, you reply, already weary, though you haven't yet begun. It takes little time for you to discover that Minoan bureaucracy is not simply paperwork. It's a philosophy, a way of life, a perverse obsession with documenting every imaginable detail, no matter how trivial. It is quickly apparent that the palace at Knossos, despite its endless corridors and grand rooms, exists merely as a container for thousands of tablets precisely identical in shape, size, and absurdity. Your first tablet records bricks. How many bricks laid today? How many bricks broken? How many bricks remain unused? Next comes mortar. The precise quantities of sand, water, and lime must be documented, and each report must be repeated, thrice verified, and then, insufferably, copied onto yet another tablet as a backup. You sit hunched by a dim oil lamp each night, meticulously carving symbols into clay with a stylus that feels heavier by the moment. Even your hand, accustomed to heavy labor, soon grows numb from the drudgery. It strikes you as both deeply ironic and deeply miserable that someone, somewhere, might someday excavate these tablets, believing them precious records of great historical value. They will assume profound significance, never realizing that what they uncover are merely endless reports of bricks, stones, and mortar, composed by workers driven half mad by repetition. As your days dissolve into evenings filled with identical tablets, you realize something startling. The bureaucracy itself is structured as a labyrinth, a perfect match for Daedalus's architecture. You wonder darkly if this endless cycle of documentation might be Daedalus's cruelest invention, far worse than his corridors of stone. For a physical maze might trap only the body, but this bureaucratic maze is carefully designed to trap the mind. Occasionally, you venture into the palace storerooms to deposit completed tablets. These chambers are filled floor to ceiling with shelves laden with thousands upon thousands of identical clay tablets. Some shelves record grain, sacks counted, grain consumed, grain remaining. Others document sheep, olive oil, or wine. But most shelves, depressingly, document only the construction process itself. Tablets and tablets filled with repetitive, meticulous, soul crushing detail. The clerks in charge of these archives are beings stripped of emotion or curiosity, their faces permanently frozen in bored seriousness. They receive your tablets, nod solemnly, and file them away without ever glancing at their contents. You wonder bitterly if anyone ever reads these tablets again, or if they simply vanish forever into bureaucratic oblivion. One night, exhausted and perhaps slightly delirious from counting stones and bricks, you question an archivist directly. Do you ever actually read these? He stares blankly, mildly confused by the novelty of your question. After a moment, he shrugs slightly and replies, "They exist. That is sufficient." You retreat in silent despair, realizing your labor is not just meaningless, but deliberately, meticulously meaningless. There are times when minor errors force you into heated debates with supervisors, stern-faced men devoted entirely to accuracy. You miscounted stones by 3, one insists, holding your tablet accusingly. I counted twice, you protest wearily. They are accurate. 3 stones, he repeats firmly, thrusting another tablet toward you. You must recount and resubmit. So you recount the stones, each one identical, indistinguishable from another, and inevitably discover that the original count was indeed correct. Yet you dutifully submit another tablet, carefully inscribed with the same repetitive numbers. The supervisor nods, satisfied not by accuracy, but by repetition itself. Your fellow workers develop curious strategies for enduring the bureaucracy. Some become so detached they mechanically carve symbols without thought, merely imitating yesterday's report. Others adopt superstitious rituals, whispering incantations, while inscribing tablets as though hoping to ward off bureaucratic evil. You, however, simply grow numb. Days stretch into months of monotonous scribbling. You begin dreaming of clay tablets. You dream of writing endless symbols, tablets piling higher and higher until you are buried alive beneath meaningless documentation. Waking offers no relief. You merely rise to continue the same dull ritual again. At times, you overhear rumors whispered among craftsmen, tales circulate of workers punished harshly, imprisoned, exiled, or worse, for inaccuracies in their reports. You shudder at these stories, imagining the profound absurdity of facing punishment for miscounted bricks. Yet you never doubt the truth behind them. Minoan bureaucracy, after all, tolerates no mistakes, real or imagined. Eventually, you encounter the bureaucracy's ultimate absurdity, a tablet specifically designed to record the number of tablets already created. You stare at it in disbelief, briefly wondering if perhaps someone is mocking you, but quickly realize that no mockery could surpass reality. You sigh, resigned, and carefully inscribe the numbers as instructed. And when even that is done, you receive yet another tablet, this time to record how many tablets you've recorded on the previous tablet. At that point, you can only laugh quietly, bitterly, realizing you have become utterly trapped in this bureaucratic maze, a nightmare from which there is no waking. One night, feeling particularly defiant, you contemplate deliberately carving nonsense into your tablet, random symbols with no meaning, a small rebellion against the crushing monotony. But when you lift the stylus, your hand falters. Fear of punishment, or perhaps simply resignation, stops you. You carve carefully, precisely, obediently. Your rebellion dies quietly before it begins. Gradually, you feel your identity eroding beneath endless tablets. You begin to forget details of your own past, your home village, family names, moments of happiness. Such things feel irrelevant compared to your duty of recording bricks and stones. You even forget exactly how long you have been here, months, years, or perhaps forever. One day, after an especially long evening spent writing identical tablets, you walk slowly back to your sleeping quarters, feet dragging across worn stones. You glances upward, noticing stars scattered coldly across the sky, each distant and identical to the next. You think bitterly that even the heavens resemble Minoan bureaucracy, vast, meticulous, indifferent. You finally lie down, eyes aching, hand cramped from writing. Sleep comes slowly, reluctantly. Before drifting away, you have one final thought, a melancholy realization that your life has itself become just another tablet, waiting silently on a shelf somewhere, filled with meticulous detail, unread, unnoticed, eternally forgotten. After months, or perhaps years, of monotonous labor and soul crushing bureaucracy, a rare break arrives. You are not pleased, of course, because by now you understand that anything disrupting the repetitive rhythm of life on Crete, inevitably leads to an even deeper, more elaborate monotony. Yet here you stand, reluctantly preparing for one of Crete's famous festivals dedicated to the sacred bull, an animal you have grown to despise for no reason other than its constant presence on every possible tablet, wall, and fresco across the palace. In truth, festivals at Knossos are not celebrations at all, but rather detailed, carefully choreographed performances of ritualized boredom. The entire palace pauses construction to partake, creating an atmosphere of compulsory cheerfulness that feels profoundly oppressive. Early in the morning, overseers wake you with unusual cheer, which only makes the experience more unpleasant. Today is the festival, announces a supervisor, smiling insincerely. Be grateful. You nod silently, already suspicious. After eating a special breakfast, barley cakes shaped into small bullheads, tasting exactly like the bland barley you consume daily, you are led to the central courtyard where the festival is held. The courtyard, spacious yet drearily symmetrical, is already crowded with craftsmen and citizens, all equally reluctant. Each person is dressed identically in ceremonial robes decorated with symbols of bulls and labyrinths, embroidered so meticulously that they feel oppressive rather than celebratory. At the festival's heart stands a large stone altar adorned with elaborate patterns, around which priests move with solemn, methodical precision. Their robes are heavy, their faces solemn masks of forced enthusiasm. Even their chanting, rhythmic and repetitive, fills you with dread rather than awe. You suspect each chant is carefully documented on clay tablets hidden somewhere, preserved for bureaucratic eternity. As the sun rises higher, the main event begins, the bull leaping ceremony. You have heard rumors of this ritual whispered among workers as something spectacular, yet vaguely terrifying. Yet now, seeing it firsthand, it strikes you as less terrifying and more absurdly monotonous. Young acrobats dressed in identical costumes enter solemnly, bowing precisely 3 times before approaching a massive bull tethered at the center of the courtyard. The bull itself appears indifferent, its large, dark eyes expressing nothing but dull resignation. Fitting, you think bitterly, given your own experiences on this island. The acrobats leap over the bull one by one, executing identical flips and rolls. Each leap is greeted by applause, so rehearsed that you suspect overseers hidden in the crowd are cueing responses on invisible tablets. After several identical rounds, the bull, uninterested from the start, lies down lethargically, refusing further cooperation. The priests quickly usher in another equally indifferent bull, ensuring the ceremony continues uninterrupted. You sigh softly, understanding now that even the bulls here have learned resignation. The festival drags on throughout the day, marked by endless ritual dances performed by dancers moving in precise circles, their expressions blank, their movements flawlessly repetitive. Musicians playing lyres and drums provide monotonous accompaniment, repeating the same melodies endlessly until they lose all meaning. You stand quietly amid this forced festivity, occasionally exchanging weary glances with your fellow craftsmen. They, too, appear trapped in the ceremony's oppressive sameness. At some point, a worker beside you leans close, whispering darkly, "This is worse than laying bricks." You nod solemnly in agreement, genuinely longing for your usual dullness. At least then you are left to your own thoughts. When evening finally approaches, the priests lead everyone into the palace's central hall. Here, torches cast flickering shadows on painted walls, where bulls and gods alike seem equally bored by their own eternal roles. The high priest solemnly presents an elaborate offering, dozens of clay jars containing wine, oil, and grain, all meticulously recorded on yet another set of clay tablets. You stifle a bitter laugh, realizing the bureaucracy follows you even here, haunting every sacred rite. At last, the most uncomfortable ritual arrives, a ceremonial sacrifice performed with unsettlingly precise movements. A young bull is led forward, its expression unreadable. You find yourself empathizing with the animal's resignation, forced to endure this pointless spectacle. The priest raises his bronze blade, chants monotonously, and strikes exactly once. Blood flows neatly into carved channels, collecting methodically into bowls held by assistant priests. Even this act of sacrifice, intended to invoke awe, seems dull and predictable, stripped of any emotional impact by endless repetition. The priests solemnly announce that this sacrifice ensures prosperity, though you sense even they doubt its effectiveness. Prosperity, after all, is merely a word documented endlessly, yet experienced rarely. The ceremony ends exactly as planned, without variation or spontaneity. You and the other spectators applaud politely, acknowledging the successful execution of yet another predictable event. As night settles over Knossos, torches illuminate the central courtyard once more. A great feast is laid out, roasted meats, fresh olives, honey cakes, yet each dish is arranged with disturbing precision, lined up identically along the tables. You eat mechanically, savoring nothing, finding even this rare luxury drained of meaning by the festival's oppressive sameness. After the meal, musicians begin again, their melodies precisely identical to those played earlier. You retreat quietly to a shadowy corner, observing dancers repeating the same movements from earlier, their expressions now openly weary. Even priests and overseers appear drained by the day's carefully scripted festivities. As you stand silently, you overhear fragments of whispered conversations among overseers. Did you record the sacrifices? The tablets must match exactly. You shake your head, mildly amazed that bureaucracy even dictates divine events, reducing faith itself into merely another series of documented repetitions. Late at night, when you finally return to your dormitory, you lie sleepless on your straw pallet, staring into darkness. Your mind replays the day's tedious ceremonies, bulls, sacrifices, chants, all merging into a single, endless stream of monotony. You begin to wonder if perhaps this is Crete's greatest irony, a civilization obsessed with labyrinths and complexity, yet hopelessly trapped in rituals of perfect, meaningless repetition. As sleep finally approaches, you have a troubling vision, an endless labyrinth filled not with stone walls, but with identical clay tablets and indifferent bulls. You wander aimlessly through this bureaucratic maze, always returning to the same place, condemned to repeat the same dull tasks for eternity. Just before sleep claims you, you feel an odd comfort. At least tomorrow will be ordinary. You will wake, return to your bricks, stones, and mortar, resuming the quiet, predictable dullness of your usual labor. The festival, with its forced cheerfulness and tedious ceremonies, will fade like a forgotten nightmare, replaced once more by the familiar monotony of building a palace that ultimately matters to no one. Closing your eyes, you allow sleep to take you, knowing only one thing for certain: monotony, however unbearable, is always preferable to the unbearable monotony of forced celebration. After countless years that have long blurred into an indistinguishable haze of repetition and monotony, the day you never expected finally arrives. The palace of Knossos is officially declared complete. You stand at the outskirts of the courtyard on this strangely cool morning, surrounded by fellow craftsmen and overseers, everyone assembled in weary silence. There is no sense of celebration or triumph, merely a quiet, collective resignation. The grandeur of the finished palace is undeniable, yet somehow oppressive. Towering walls, intricate frescoes, endless corridors, all standing as a tribute not to greatness, but to futility. You find it difficult to feel pride in the perfect symmetry of walls you personally constructed, or the flawlessly documented bricks you've counted. The palace seems less like a building and more like a vast monument to wasted time. Daedalus himself appears, older now, his once sharp features softened by decades of meticulous anxiety. He ascends a small podium to address the workers and dignitaries gathered before him, his face stern yet resigned. This palace, he begins solemnly, represents our devotion to order, symmetry, and permanence. You glance around, observing the indifferent expressions of your fellow workers. Order and symmetry, two concepts you've grown to loathe precisely because they lack any meaning beyond their repetition. Daedalus continues, outlining future plans for maintenance and careful record keeping, ensuring the bureaucratic machinery you've come to despise will continue indefinitely. You find yourself feeling strangely empty rather than relieved. After Daedalus finishes speaking, the crowd disperses silently. You wander alone through familiar corridors, your footsteps echoing softly against walls you've spent your life building. You reach out, running fingers across polished surfaces, each stone painstakingly placed by hands now older, rougher, and exhausted beyond repair. At one junction, you pause, noticing a room you've never entered, despite your years here. You step inside cautiously. It is filled with neatly stacked clay tablets, hundreds upon hundreds, lining every shelf, each tablet perfectly identical to the next. You realize with dark amusement that your entire life's work, every stone laid, brick counted, mortar mixed, has been distilled into these tablets, quietly stored away, unnoticed and irrelevant. An archivist enters silently behind you, his robes gray and indistinct, matching his expression. You admire the archives, he asks monotonously, with no genuine interest. You reply quietly, bitterness in your voice. Is this really all we've achieved? He shrugs indifferently. Achievement is a matter of perspective. These tablets represent order. They document our history. But who will read them, you ask, unable to suppress your frustration? Read? He looks genuinely puzzled. These tablets aren't meant to be read, only preserved. You leave him standing among his meaningless clay records, deeply unsettled yet unsurprised. As the days pass after the completion, life becomes quieter, but no less monotonous. You continue to perform minor repairs, always documented precisely, carefully inscribed onto yet more tablets. There is no sense of ending, only a vague continuation of purposelessness. The palace, completed, majestic, and utterly useless, remains eerily empty. The royalty rarely visits, preferring distant palaces closer to the sea. The priests rarely conduct rituals beyond occasional, repetitive ceremonies that seem as empty as the halls themselves. Soon you decide to leave Knossos forever. Your departure is marked by a little fanfare. You gather your sparse belongings, worn sandals, faded clothing, and a small sack containing nothing but vague memories, and set out toward the harbor, retracing your steps from the distant past. At the docks, the same dull ships wait patiently, their sails unchanged, captains still speaking monotonously of tides, winds, and currents. You board a vessel heading to the mainland, sitting silently at the stern, watching Crete fade slowly into a gray silhouette on the horizon. Only now do you allow yourself to feel the weight of your lost years. Your youth and vitality were spent building something grand, but ultimately meaningless, an elaborate illusion of significance. Arriving home after decades of absence, you find your village unfamiliar. Faces have changed, homes rebuilt. Even your family barely recognizes you, responding with polite detachment rather than warmth. You have become a stranger, shaped by monotony, indistinguishable from countless other nameless laborers forgotten by history. Sometimes at night, lying sleepless beneath familiar yet unfamiliar skies, your thoughts return to Knossos. You envision the palace now empty and dark, halls echoing only with silence. You imagine the tablets gathering dust, unread, preserving details no one will ever care to uncover. Perhaps someday future generations will stumble upon the ruins, excavating carefully, reverently. They will marvel at the precision, speculate about great kings, royal feasts, or sacred rituals. And yet, you know with bitter certainty that their speculations will miss the truth, that Knossos was built not from glory, but from tedious repetition, endless bureaucracy, and quiet despair. Years pass quietly. You age, becoming yet another anonymous figure in history. Occasionally, stories filter back from Crete, tales of earthquakes, invasions, fires. You hear vague accounts of the palace falling into disrepair, abandoned corridors reclaimed by ivy, labyrinthine storerooms now tombs for unread tablets. Yet these reports stir no sadness or regret. Instead, you feel a distant satisfaction, perhaps relief, that your life's monotonous labor has been erased, forgotten as it always deserved to be. One quiet evening, sitting alone, watching sunset colors fade into indistinct darkness, you reflect once more upon your years at Knossos. You consider the countless bricks placed, stones counted, sacrifices witnessed, and tablets recorded, all merging into a single, meaningless blur. You find yourself questioning, perhaps cynically, if human achievement is nothing more than repetitive attempts at permanence destined inevitably for decay. Finally, with quiet resignation, you accept that your life at Knossos, a life spent building something grand, yet ultimately empty, was not a failure, but rather a perfect representation of the human condition itself, meticulous, monotonous, and entirely temporary. You close your eyes, resting your tired body beneath an indifferent sky. And as you drift toward sleep, you allow yourself one final thought, a bitter yet peaceful acceptance that history, despite its pretensions, is merely repetition, endlessly building monuments destined to crumble quietly into forgotten dust.